All right, we're here with the newest edition of the Driveline podcast. I'm Tanner Stokey. I'm the director of hitting, here with Elijah Boyer, our lead hitting trainer in Arizona, and Zach Settles, our lead HP trainer here in Washington. So today we're going to get into in-season training. More specifically, we'll go a little bit higher level on what you should be focused on during the season, what matters, what you should care about, why. From there, we'll get a little bit more granular. We're going to get into the things like the guys that didn't make your team for the spring, high school, college, whatever, what you should be doing, how you should be spending your time. And then take that even a step further. We'll get a little bit into like the situation. Maybe you're a red shirt or injury or something. You're not getting playing time, how you should go about your business and practice and why that is important. So I think to start on the in-season training side, we'll get with you, Zach, on the high performance side. So it's like generally what are some things that are really important? What should guys care about and really what should they be focused on?
I mean, I think first and foremost, the most important thing is to actually continue to lift. You hear a lot of times that guys just avoid lifting because, one, they want to feel really good for their competition, and two, they're just afraid of being fatigued for their competition, and they're afraid of like the residual effects from the actual lifts during the season. Right. But realistically, like if that's happening, that's coming down to two factors, which is either like improper training leading you into the season that like didn't lead you to being prepared for the stimulus of lifting. Like at that point, you shouldn't be really getting that neurologically or like fatigue from that. Mm-hmm. And then also another factor is just going to be like bad dosage, right? Like bad programming, whether it's too much volume, too much intensity in volume, not organizing when you're doing the lifting stuff, the lifting days, like around the game day schedules. It also could be just like something due to like poor practices as far as just like poor time management of how those practices are organized, too many high intent days in a row. So it's really like dependent on the athlete to like continue to lift and then to make sure that they're like dosing those lifts properly and then getting themselves into a routine a few weeks before the season. So that way they're able to kind of hit the ground running rather than just like being super sore, being super blown up, being afraid to lift, not lifting. And then you start to see the decline in strength, see the decline in your power that you worked on all off season to build. You're starting to lose muscle mass. And then the real reason why you didn't want to lift during the season, which is like, you didn't want to feel banged up or lose performance. All of a sudden, like performance starts to fall off because your strength and power gains that you made during the season start to fall off. Bat speed starts to fall off. Velocity starts to fall off if you're a pitcher. And then also injuries kind of start popping up as soon as like tissue quality and overall capacity goes down.
That was great.
Yeah. So if you were to say a guy to miss one way, would you say miss lifting too heavy or too light? Like assuming they don't train with us, obviously if they train with us, we'd give them a plan. But like for guys that are listening to this without one, which way should they miss?
Yeah. Whether they're on their own or they're doing stuff with their team, how should they go about that?
I would say don't miss on the intensity, miss on the volume. So like at that point, like don't do too much volume. Like that's going to be the biggest thing, right? Like if you're lifting too heavy, your ton of volume, we're going to really see that start to get into the areas of like why guys don't like to lift during the season. Where if we can lift like 85 to 90% of our 1 rep max during the season at very low dosages, like you're still going to be able to maintain a lot of those strength qualities that we were able to build during the season. So yeah, I would definitely say if you're going to err on the side of like too much volume or too little volume, like probably little volume,
but keep the weight high, keep the intensity high.
And I think that's where like a big issue comes about, right? Like we've all been in the weight room where it's like, I'm not going to work out. I don't have an hour and a half to work out today. So I'm not going to go hit it. Where it's like in season, it's like, hey, I can only get 1 to 2 lifts in this week. That's literally way better than doing nothing. Like at the end of the day, like doing nothing is going to have way more of like a negative effect on you than if you are able to get like one good day of lifting in. Like obviously it's not the most ideal thing in the world, but like it's going to set you up way better for success as the season carries on.
Yeah. So there are a couple things I take from that. Like one, like the biggest thing as far as like dosage, sets, reps, intensity, anything like that, it comes down to managing your workload, obviously. So you got to take into account, like if you're in college, you got a lot going on with classes. Maybe you have early morning weights with the team. Maybe you have to work, things like that. There's a lot that goes into it as well. So like managing your workload isn't just like how much you're doing, right? It's like a combination of everything and what goes into it, like the physical, like the mental, neurological taxing, that type of stuff matters a lot. But like overall, the main thing you're trying to accomplish within season, it's maintenance, right?
Right.
So like you're trying to maintain, and that's where it gets into the idea of like you're better off pushing high intensity at much, much lower volume because you can maintain that way. It's the best way to do it. And if you balance the workload well, you can continue to gain obviously harder to do. But yeah, all that being said, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, like what are the type of time frames where like these types of like attributes start to atrophy? I think that's a good word to use
Yeah.
there, right? So it's like as far as like
Like how fast
speed,
they diminish.
power, strength, like how quickly do these things start to diminish, and like why is it important to keep lifting in season because of those reasons?
Yeah, I mean, I would say very fast, right? Like as far as like speed and power qualities, like those can diminish within like a week. If
Yeah.
you're not training like high speeds, like those you start to get diminishing returns like within a week.
Yeah, and then like that's the thing that's like directly applicable on the high performance side and on the hitting side, right? Like when you say speed, like it's not just talking about your sprint speed, like your home to first time, first to third, your 60, whatever you care about, right? Like that directly translates more so into like power, overall speed, overall power. So like same thing, if you're not focused on training to maintain your bat speed, that's going to diminish really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And then like, I mean, if you're looking at overall strength, like you're talking 2 to 3 weeks. Muscle mass, you're talking like 3 to 4 weeks. So it's just like those guys who decide, hey, I got a 3-month season coming up, I'm not going to lift. By the end of the season, basically, I wouldn't say it was a complete waste, everything that you did in the off season, but you've definitely lost a lot of those gains that you built up during the off season to get you to the point where it's like, yes, we want to feel good the first couple of weeks of the season, but at the end of the day, especially for the highly more competitive teams, like you want to be peaking towards the end of the season or like middle to the end of the season and being at your best for like when the competition really matters.
Yeah, and like obviously we're talking in season right now, but what this really points to is like really getting after it in the off season to build up that workload to make sure you're in a good place, obviously to perform at the start of the season, but so that you can continue to keep lifting that way. Obviously the volume changes,
right?
But you continue to keep lifting to where you can maintain these skills throughout the season. That's only going to help you manage your workload. It's only going to help you stay healthy, strong, powerful, everything you really care about during the season. So it's like a lot of times the guys that like, man, I don't want to lift in season, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like a lot of times those are the same guys who don't really lift that hard in the off season, right?
Yeah.
You could assume in a lot of cases you don't have the workload capacity built up. At least historically, that's how it's worked for you. Because like when you do lift in the season, it's you probably haven't done it in a week, 2 weeks. I get it, you get busy, things like that, but it has to be a priority, not only during the season to maintain it, but like it makes it really, really important how you go about your off season. And honestly, it just ties back to like that YCP, that yearly training plan, to make sure you're balancing things well. You're mapping it out to perform when you're supposed to be performing.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of times too, guys just run into the issue of like improper exercise selection. Like that also plays a role into it as well, right? Like if I'm barbell back squatting super heavy for high volume, like, yeah, my back's going to be a little bit more beat up. I'm not going to feel as great all the time, but that's like, we're like making sure that you find somebody that knows what they're doing and what they're talking about. It's really important because yes, you want to find more joint friendly exercise selection. It's okay to use more machines during the season that are going to be a little bit more joint friendly. I think microdosing your programming throughout the off season, or in season, like you said, it's very time consuming, right? Like you have especially if you're a college student, homework, school in general, season, practice, everything that comes along with that, to where, maybe you only have 30 minutes to get in a lift that day. So like do that every day and just dose it out properly, dynamic, strength, accessory, and just keep alternating those. You're going to see way better results than if you just avoided it altogether.
Yeah. So one of the first things you talk about there was exercise selection, right? Like it obviously depends, but can you touch on some of the exercises you'd recommend? Like what are some specific modifications? Like the example you used was like a heavy squat.
Right.
It's obviously gonna be a little bit tougher on the spine, probably a little tougher on the knees. What would be a good modification for like, let's just say some of like the main lifts?
Right. So like, yeah, I mean, I think like if you're elevating the trap bar deadlift, really good exercise. Really work good focus on like concentric power, like elevate it a little bit, drop it at the top. Don't worry about the eccentric portion of the movement. Different, like if we're going to go more so like split squat variations, like do it from pins, do it to where you don't have to worry about the eccentric stress. Like you can add the eccentric stuff in your accessory and do more isometric holds and yielding isometrics towards the end. Obviously not right before you play a game, but like that stuff's not going to have as much of it like a negative effect and make you super sore the next day. But you're still getting the output part of the exercise selection that you're looking for, more of the rate of force development stuff that you worked on all off season, especially later in the off season. That's really going to pay dividends towards like improving your bat speed and maintaining the high bat speeds that you guys are able to put on those hitters at the end of the off season.
That's great.
Yeah. That makes me just think about guys like leaving on a Thursday night, to go get to the hotel, waking up Friday, playing Friday, Saturday, coming back on Sunday. And it's like I guess now based off what we're saying, it's almost get your rest Sunday, hit it hard Monday, like that high intensity, lower volume, and just do it that way instead of like trying to kill yourself when you get back from the bus trip Sunday, or like waking up early and hitting the hotel weights with bicep curls and all that stuff. It's like prioritize it just the best way you can.
Yeah, and just developing a routine that works for you, right? Like that's the biggest thing. Is like everybody's going to be different on how they respond to certain stimuluses, as you guys have noticed, obviously on the hitting side. So it's just like, you know what? If it works in the time that athlete feels good getting in the weight room is Sundays, like by all means, get it in. But like if you're somebody that like you're just not going to get a whole lot out of it and you're not playing until Friday, like Monday works perfectly fine. And then if you want to like dose like a heavy lower on Monday, heavy upper on Tuesday, and then like a nice movement, full body quality day on Thursday that sets you up for success and has you feeling good for the weekend, like that's a great way to go about it. So it's just like, as far as it's just taking a step back and being able to organize it properly and like prioritizing it, which is something that you said earlier. Like it's just super important that we prioritize, maintain, like it's the same thing on the hitting side. And I'm sure you guys feel exactly the same. It's like when guys focus on bat speed training all off season and then they get to their teams and all of a sudden they just stop focusing on it. You starting to see like the trend start to move downwards as far as their bat speed data goes.
And it happens fast, man.
It's
fast.
Like
you get a few weeks into not doing any targeted bat speed work, and like all of a sudden you're like, hey, like I'm struggling. Like, it's like something's going on with this, something's going on with this. And it's like really clear that, man, you're just losing speed. Like, so your sense of time, your perception there, like it's different, right? You have to like recalibrate to where you're at a given time. And you spend all off season really getting after it and driving these numbers up. Like, maintaining it is one of the most important things you can do. And again, that all goes back to monitoring your workload. Like you need to be lifting. You obviously you need to be sleeping. You need to be eating well. And like you really, really have to prioritize these things. Like maintaining this stuff in the season, it isn't as simple as just like, oh, like I have to make sure I'm still lifting. I have to make sure I'm still doing my bat speed work. Like you have to manage that workload really well. And you have to do the other things that honestly might be even harder to do for like the really driven athlete that loves to train and loves to work, like making sure you're prioritizing sleep, making sure you're prioritizing your nutrition, and not only eating enough calories, but eating nutrient dense calories, which just makes it even harder. Right. But yeah, all that being said, on the hitting side specifically, Boyer, we'll tag team this one a little bit. But like, what are some of the important things to focus on for hitters during the season?
Yeah, I think you touched on a pretty big one. It's like making sure that your bat speed stays up. Everything you worked on the off season doesn't just kind of fly to the wayside. My mind always goes to just the time constraints of being a college athlete.
Yep.
So I'm thinking more in like that space, and high school probably even harder in this regard. But like just the room you have to train, like you don't have the mini hack every day with smash balls and an underload. Like, so you have to get creative. So I'd say
you got to make the most of what you have access to.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little different from guy to guy, school to school.
It's going to be so different. Like I remember most times I would go rushing from class to like hitting BP. It's like you're not getting your dynamic in. You're not getting hit mobility in.
Yeah, you're just going to show and go because you want to make sure you don't miss your BP round, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so like a big part of that is like targeted, focused work the right way. And it's not like just swinging for the sake of swinging. Like you have a much smaller window to get your work in during the season. And again, it's different from guy to guy, different from school to school, even more so on the guy to guy basis, where it's like you might have a different class schedule for some of your teammates. You might have a lab or something like that overlaps the beginning of practice, right? So it's like you have to make sure you're taking advantage of the time you have. And when you do have time to swing, you do have time to hit, you're not just going through the motions of taking reps for the sake of taking reps, right? It's like some of the really important things, like we've touched on a bunch of times already. It's like maintaining your bat speed, right? So it's like if you're show and going your BP session, you're not hot, you're not warmed up, you're not going to be moving fast. Your kinematics are going to be different. You're not taking the same types of swings you would be when you're warmed up, been moving, hot, that tissue temperature is up. Good buzzword there. So it's like you have to make sure, like when it is time to train, you're getting the most out of it and you're ready to do so, right? It's like one of the overlooked things with bat speed training is just keeping the intensity high. Like obviously mixing in things like speed trainers, underload work is really, really important in the season, especially if you're working at a low volume, just so you're keeping that speed up. overspeed intensity there. But yeah, like it's really overlooked that just the fact that like taking high intensity swings, even at lower volume, like that's going to like push that intensity, push that ceiling and make sure you're maintaining where you're at. It's like, even if you don't have access to overload bats, underload bats, something like a blast sensor is so incredibly important. One, to monitor your workload and like fatigue levels, like you can easily see swing by swing if your speeds are falling off. Maybe something's off with the acceleration, right? But just like monitoring that bat speed swing to swing, even if you don't have the different training bats with your game bat and push that intensity. And like you could do something as simple as like, all right, I'm going to do like one bat speed round a day or every other day, something like that with my game bat. You put the blast on and it's like, all right, I'm going to take a couple swings, set like a baseline number, say that speed is 70. I'm going to take like another round here where I'm like really swinging high intent for like 10 swings. And if that number starts to fall below like 70, 68 miles an hour or something like that, then you stop. But it's like really important where like you don't necessarily have to do a bunch of volume. And this is where it's very similar to the weight room side. You don't have to do a bunch of volume. That intensity is the thing that's really going to help you maintain it. So it's like you could go that round of 10 and just like really make sure you're taking like 10, 15, 20 seconds between swings, right? You're not just like rapid fire going through the motions for the sake of swinging just to swing so you're getting your reps in. That's not really going to do a lot for you, right? You're just going through the motions. It has to be like very specific, targeted, focused work to make sure you're maintaining these skills over time.
Yeah. And I think at first players might think like, oh, I gotta, make a plan, and maybe that'll like sound like more work at first, like more time consuming. But in the end, I think it saves you tons of time and reps when you can just prioritize that intensity and volume at the right time, instead of just always trying to swing extra every day because you're trying to break into the lineup or whatever scenario. So yeah. I think it actually saves you time by knowing this stuff and getting it dialed in.
Yeah, the other thing there is like, obviously we want to focus on maintaining skills, right? But we are in season, we are in competition mode. So like the focus and how you're going about training definitely needs to change, right? So like from a baseline level of trying to maintain your bat speed, right? Like you do 1-2 bat speed days a week where you're taking like 6, 7, 8 swings with each of the overload, underload bats, things like that with blast on, or you're just doing a couple days a week with your game bat, pushing high intensity. Like that really matters, but that should be a smaller subset of the work you're doing in practice, right? Like, and if you are able to, this is where it kind of gets into different environments and things guys have access to. If you're able to, you're very likely better off blending it into more of like a competition type focus. Some of the things you could do there with like your bat speed work, say with the speed trainers, right? You're going to take a round with the barrel load, the handle load, the underload, and your game bat. 5 to 8 swings with a gap in between to make sure you're rested and recovered between so you can push the intensity. Like you can blend that with something like hitting plyos, or Boyer, you mentioned earlier, like using smash factor balls off a mini hack, something like that. So like you are pushing the speed intensity, but the environment is a little bit harder where it's more blend towards bat speed plus bat to ball. So the output you're really focused on there is you're obviously looking to move fast, but it's less about speed for the sake of speed. It's more about you want to move fast and make flush contact. Blending the hitting plyos is going to help you do that. Doing that smash fractal ball is going to do that. So it's like this gets into like that YTP we talked about, and like planning out your off season to in season, how things are going to change over time. And like maybe early on in the off season, say for a college guy, it's like the start of June, right? Like your bat speed work is going to be a little bit more controlled environments, and your focus is really moving the bat fast when you're doing that. But as you get closer to the season, especially like January, February now, like some guys are a couple weeks into their seasons already, like your bat speed work needs to be blended a little more towards a competition focus. So like when you're doing bat speed in season, it should be more focused on the like collision efficiency, like hitting the ball harder, right? Like at the end of the day, you care about bat speed because it has a linear relationship to exit velocity. You move the bat faster, you get the ball harder. That's obviously on your top end, but it's also like on an average basis as far as like increasing that margin for error. But like early on in the off season in your training, you're focused on speed itself. But the goal is to transfer that to exit velocity. So as you get closer to competition, the focus is more about hitting the ball harder. You want to move the bat fast so you can hit the ball hard. Hit the ball hard when you're not off time. Try to optimize the misses. So blending in things like the plyo balls, you can honestly do some sort of work there with like a skinnier underload bat and like the mini plyos. That's going to lean a little bit further towards the bat to ball type of side of things too. So like a lot of different ways you can go about doing this, but at the end of the day, like the goal is to maintain what you've built out throughout the off season, throughout the entire season.
Would you guys ever recommend not treating it like a competition, like not putting the guys in competition settings, like as far as like at least for a few rounds, just saying like, hey, just to maintain this quality, like we're just ripping bat speed.
Yeah, it depends on the guy for sure, right? And like that's what Boyer's getting at with like setting up a plan,
right?
It just depends. Like if you have a bunch of time and freedom and resources, you can do a lot of stuff,
right?
But some guys need to pack it all into tight windows. Like maybe they're able to do this type of work only before practice or after practice, and when they're inside of their practice, they have to do exactly what their team wants them to do, right? So like maybe that means you can't use the underload in your BP on the field. You have to use your game bat. Maybe you can't use your blast during practice. Like that's something that happens really often. I think it's ridiculous, but coaches are going to do what they're going to do.
It does happen.
Right. So like, yeah, the answer is yes. It just depends. Right. And if you have a bunch of time and freedom to do it in different ways, you absolutely can. And in that sense, it's easier to really like bucket and strictly focus on the bat speed in like a really controlled environment to like push the intensity, keep the speed up. But then the rest of the work throughout the day is like, you're already potentiated here. You're already done your maintenance work. The rest of the work, it's like, all right, now I'm really going to lock in on like this path thing I'm focused on. I'm really going to focus on my ball flight here. Maybe in practice today, in the BP plan, we have like a bunch of execution rounds. So like your focus has to change, and you basically have to be able to adapt to the environment you're in based off the different constraints, the cards you're dealt with.
Right. And I think in the good tillering we just had, like how hard it is, like skill acquisition, how difficult that is for hitting.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's maybe a little bit of a hot take, but your skill is pretty much there when you go into a season as a hitter. Like I don't think you're going to magically become like a better hitter as it goes on by training bat to ball every day. Like you are acquiring the skill through the ABs, through going through the season. That's as hard as it gets, right? Like you're in the game.
Yeah.
You're training bat to ball every time you play. So like, and swing decisions. So I found myself mostly just doing bat speed days when I coached at Lansing. Like I feel like 80% of those days in season were bat speed days because it feels like the one thing you can control.
Yeah, and it's incredibly important. Like Zach said early on, like you're going to lose speed attributes really, really quickly. It's something like the research says something like around a week, 5 to 8 days, something like that, right? So it's like realistic, and it's not going to be exactly the same for everybody, obviously, right? But like realistically, like if you don't do any targeted speed work, whether it's in the weight room or it's with like an underload bat or something like that, for 2 weeks during your season, like you can't expect to have the same level of bat speed going forward, right? And then like as you start to lose it, it only gets harder to bring it back up to where it was during the season.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point. Is like once you stop doing it to restart and try to get it back, and to do that, like now you're just playing catch up, and like the last thing you want to do during the season, especially if you're in a slump, because at that point, if you're changing what you've been doing during the season, you're most likely hit a point where something needs to change. And so it's like if you're at that point of the season, you're trying to play catch up, like now you already just dug yourself a hole and you're trying to get out of it.
So much harder to get out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've pretty much covered this at a high level on both sides, right? There's obviously a lot more nuance and details we can get into. But I specifically want to talk about like the high level here. We're more talking about the guys that are playing often, right? So like I specifically want to get to the examples of guys who like maybe you didn't make the team in the spring, maybe you did make the team and you're not playing. You're the red shirt, maybe you're the freshman at the Power 5, who's Power 4, excuse me. That's like riding the pine. You're not playing right now, so like obviously that sucks, and we want you want to be playing, you want to be competing and be with the team, like you've been working really hard for it, but like at the same time you have a opportunity to really focus on development in these windows so that when you do have your opportunity to play, you're actually going to be able to make the most of it, right? So it's like even more important to do these things if you didn't make the team, obviously, because at that point you're getting ready for summer ball when you need to go get some reps because you're not going to get any during the season, right? It's your only time to actually get at bats, things like that. But at the same time, like the guy who is on the team, but you're not playing, if you're only going through the motions and just like doing the things that you're doing with the team, you're doing yourself a disservice, like plain and simple, right? It's like not only are you not getting reps in the game, but you're not going to be the one who's getting prioritized in practice time, especially as a redshirt, right? So if the only time you're training is when you're practicing with your team, you also don't have this big workload component of playing in games, right? So like you have so much more time and freedom and training economy to be able to focus on developing. So like those types of guys need to look at things completely different than the guy that's in the lineup every day. So we can kind of bucket these red shirts and the guys that didn't make the team together. Obviously it's not that simple, But on the high performance side in the weight room, like what should be happening there? How should it be different relative to the guys that are actually playing all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, you're on the bench or you got redshirted, you should be stoked, but you have a lot less to worry about as far as that stuff goes, as far as like managing workload and training economy. Like now you can allocate a lot of your training economy to similar to what you would do in the off season. Like now you have a really like a lot of those guys that are in season, and Boyer, I think you were kind of touching on it as far as like you don't really have too many opportunities to keep raising your ceiling. Like yes, we can work on bat speed, yes, we can focus on it, but at the end of the day, a couple times a week you got to go out there and compete. These guys don't have that constraint, that limitation as far as how they can keep raising their ceiling. So it's like you can get after it a little bit more in the weight room. You can allocate a little bit more of that training economy to improving your strength, improving your rate of force development, improving your overall capacity. Like there are certain, and like I'm sure at that point, whether you've been cut or you're not playing, like if you look in the mirror, you probably know why. Mm-hmm. So you have a really good opportunity to kind of take that step back and figure out, all right, I'm not strong enough. Like I redshirted at my junior college, my freshman year, and my coach just straight up told me, he said, you don't throw hard enough. So it's like I could have pouted. I could have not done anything. So it's like, all right, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try to figure out how to throw harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was 12 years ago. So like Driveline wasn't necessarily a big thing at that point. But like, so it's like I picked up a 3-ounce baseball and I tried to huck it multiple times. Like, and it's like now we have so much information out there where it's like, oh, I could have laid out my days this way. I could have prioritized the weight room in this way. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't like, yeah, sure. You're facing hitters to give them live looks during the practice, but like, let's be real. Like that's not going to get me on the field immediately. So as long as I'm not putting myself at like any form of like injury risk, like prioritizing raising the ceiling and getting after in the weight room and focusing on like raising my ceiling as a pitcher, that was priority number one, and that should be at that time.
Yeah, and it's obviously a little bit trickier on the throwing side, the pitching side, where like the injury risk is definitely higher at all times. Like, and if you are throwing live at bats to the starting lineup during practice, like you probably shouldn't be blowing out velo every day of the week. And I'm not the best person to speak on pitching, obviously, but you hit on something exactly where I was planning to take this next, right? Like you didn't make the team or you're not playing. There is very much a reason for that. Right. And like a lot of guys are going to cry like, oh man, the coach doesn't like me, like all these sorts of things. And sometimes that's true. Don't get me wrong. But like, there's a very clear reason you're not playing, or you're not on the team. Right. And if you're not able to take that step back and realize what it is, like, again, you're just doing yourself a disservice because you have no plan. You have no way, no reason to improve and figure out how you can get the opportunity to get onto the field. So it's like, you have this huge opportunity to develop some skills. And in most cases, if you didn't make the team or you're not playing, like your skills aren't up to par, right? Like everybody else is just better than you. So like you should be even more motivated to get in the weight room, especially if you're a guy that's riding the bench every day, right? Like you're watching everybody play, you think you're good enough and you can't compete at this level. It's like you have an opportunity to like really push your skill set up. So you have to take advantage of that opportunity. And all that being said, like you have to have a good idea, and you gotta know why, right? You gotta know what it is specifically. You're obviously gonna run into the situations where you have like the really physical athlete who's like really strong, powerful, but they're just not skilled enough, right? It's like that's the guy like you probably shouldn't just go out of your way and just like absolutely crush the weight room. It should still be a big focus, but like what you're doing in there is gonna be very different than the guy who is pretty skilled, but just like underdeveloped physically. Right. So you got to know yourself. Again, that's the same thing. It always points back to the importance of an assessment. But it should be really clear in those situations, like why you're not good enough. A lot of times with a young guy at a college program, you're generally just not physically developed, right? So it's like you have to crush the weight room. That's only going to help you move the bat faster, hit the ball harder. It's going to help you stay healthier long term, right? It's one of the things to help you like get into better positions, be under control when you're doing things. It's only going to help you. And the flip side of that, the guy who is like crazy physical but isn't skilled enough, that's just like, again, clear signal of what you need to focus and spend your time on. Now it gets a little trickier if it's a situation where like your swing decisions are just horrendous, right? It's hard if you're not getting at bats, like that's the type of situation where if you have access to pitching machine like an iPitch or something, which a lot of college programs don't, like you should be seeing mixed pitch all the time. You should be looking for somebody to throw you mixed pitch BP and throw balls in and out of the strike zone. So you're practicing making swing decisions. You should be spending as much time as humanly possible, especially if you're not playing at all, standing in on bullpens. You should just see pitch planes out of an arm. You should try to pick that up and track as often as possible. Little things like that are only going to help you. And again, I got to get back to the point of like, you have to focus on improving your bat speed in those situations. It sucks you're not playing, but you have this golden opportunity to really push your skill set up. And hopefully you get in a situation, maybe a late game blowout, and like you've just been training for a couple weeks and you just like hit a rod in the gap, hit a double or a homer. And like, if you really take the time to focus on improving your skills and getting better in those times you're not playing, it's only going to make your life easier and give you more opportunities down the road.
Yeah, 1,000%.
I just rambled there for a while. What do you got, boy?
No, I mean, you rambled the truth. Man, this one hits home so close for me because I redshirted my first year.
It's funny that all three of us having this conversation redshirted our first year of college.
And I can almost guarantee this part's different. And then I basically sat the bench for the next 5 years. Like, basically, I mean, the skill just wasn't there. Like, I was so strong in the weight room, and I just thought, just by working harder, swinging more, like I just worked my face off, and it did not help me.
Yeah, because you weren't.
That is so hard to swallow, that, dude.
Uh-huh.
Do you know how hard that is? And that's why I'm passionate about this, because you got to get with someone that gives you a game plan, man. Like, you're not the crazy skilled guy. I was 5'7", trying to play the outfield at like a power Division II school, and it's like I needed more pop, and it was clear mechanical issues that held me back. Like, I had to have like a -5 attacking on every swing, and I've seen
it. It wasn't good.
It was not great, and maybe you could blame the player to some degree and say, oh, maybe I should have went and figured it out on my own or been more inquisitive or whatever. But like, we have this now. Like, we can help.
Yeah,
I just hope every guy who needs help and doesn't make the team, I would love for him to reach out to us so we could actually give you a game plan, so you don't have to go through that. You don't have to struggle alone. You have guys in your corner. It just would have changed my entire career. So, like,
for sure,
a plan is so important.
And that's the thing. Like, obviously, we're confident in our abilities to help. And like, if you're watching this and you're not playing, if you are playing, like, you should reach out. We can help you. There's no question. But like, the thing that really points to is just like, if you don't know what you're doing, it's like you just need a coach, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody has the means to pay for or afford a private coach, an independent coach outside of your teams, right? But like, that being said, we have free programs on the website. We have resources. We have courses, certs, lots of things like that you can look to. And honestly, there's a lot of stuff on the internet outside of our stuff. And whether or not you're looking for a coach inside of our ecosystem, like, you should just find somebody that can help you, right? If you don't have any idea, you don't have direction, whether you're not getting it from your coaches at school, previous coaches you've had, like, at the end of the day, like, this is your career, and it's up to you to look for people that could help you, right? And whether that's with us or not, like, one of the best and most important things you can do is like hire a coach, like hire someone to help you to make sure you have a plan and you're focused on the right things. Because like you said, that really hits home with you. And like, I was very much the same way. Like, I worked my ass off, spent a ton of time in the weight room, and I took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of swings every single day. And I was just focused on the wrong stuff because I had no idea. Granted, there's no chance I would have been able to afford a private coach at the time, anything like that. But like, anything I'd be able to find where there's some direction on what I should be focused on, it would have changed my life because I had the work ethic for it. I just didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah,
I think that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I was extremely fortunate to have a guy that ended up being a future hitting trainer with us, Chase Klom, who worked at my junior college.
I love me some Chase Klom.
Because he was in so many ways so much further ahead of like where baseball was at in 2012, 2013, which is funny to act like that was so long ago.
You're old, man.
But like,
low-key was.
But realistically, like the way that we were training, we always had a focus. And I'm not saying like we did everything perfect, like there's no way, but like just following a plan is just such like a huge step in the right direction, because it could be, and I've noticed it, right? Like you see somebody's lifting plan, you're like, man, this sucks. Like this is crazy volume. You're doing crazy exercise selection. And then you get them on the force plates and it's like, damn, you're kind of a beast. And it's like, if somebody's completely bought in, you're just going to see so much better results and so much better gains than you could be the best program in the world. If you're not into it, like it's not going to do anything for you. So like going back to like being in a similar boat as far as redshirting and having the fortune of having a guy like that to kind of take me to the next level. Not that I was anything that great, but like at the end of the day, like it just I basically was tapping out on my genetic potential just because we actually had a plan to follow and get after it the right way, and actually talk about workload and managing that workload and splitting up our days of like high and low days on the throwing side. Like that was just so beneficial and so ahead of its time. And it makes sense that now he's a hitting coordinator with the Tigers. Like the guy, like, but it's like being in, like, I was lucky. Like at that time he was willing to train me for free.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, obviously like right place, right time comes into play, but yeah, having a coach and having somebody to give you some direction, you can't undervalue that.
That's real. Boyer, if you were a hitter and you had one thing to focus on in your practice during the season, what would it be?
In practice, as in like I'm on the field taking BP?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, 4 rounds of 6, and I could just do whatever I want out there.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess if I were just to think about myself, I would spend the first 2 rounds just like low line drives everywhere, because I was more of like that kind of hitter. And then the last 2 rounds every single day, I would absolutely let it eat now, like as much bad speed as possible, just to feel myself moving fast and like trying to pull the ball hard in the air. Because even just messing around now in like my older age, I've noticed just trying to pull the ball correctly cleans up almost like all the other things mechanically. Like it's actually because it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing to do.
For sure.
Like I can throw my hands and backspin something in the oppo gap. Like that's not the hardest thing. But when you're trying to actually like pull something with with some aggression, like it's easy for things to get out of whack, to like cheat it too much, get rippy, all that stuff. So I would challenge myself every day to have good pull side ball flight.
I love that. How would you take it a step further, right? Like how would you, Zach mentioned like I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but Zach mentioned like going like back and forth on like high low days on the pitching side. How would you start to like blend that sort of thing with hitting? Right. So like say you were taking that same type of BP round every day, right? Would it be exactly the same? Would it be a little different day to day? Like obviously you're looking to go pull side and like keep the bat speed up and move fast, but like how would you kind of balance that workload like day to day? Would you shift the focus one day like bat speed to more of like bat to ball focused? And if so, what would that look like?
Yeah, I actually really liked something that you had brought up. I think a few like maybe weeks ago. I'm not sure now, but like guys that like to do a round of bat speed on game day, like that's how I would go like that 1 round of bat speed on game day to feel fast, and that's how I would prioritize the volume and intensity part, to where I want to feel fast on a game day, and then I'm kind of chilling the other days, because I don't know, I just like to get amped up for the game, I guess.
Yeah, and it depends on like how often you're playing and things like that, and like what.
Like I'm assuming if you're playing every day, like that's what I would want to feel. I'd want to feel fast before I played, so I would prioritize that on those days, and then go lower on the others.
Yeah, are we talking like those bat speed days? Are we talking like overload underload work? We talking mostly heavy bat, mostly light bat? If you had to pick one, what would you focus on during the season?
No, I'd go overload underload for sure.
Yeah,
overload underload and some long bat.
Why the long bat?
The long bat, I think it helps guys get that hip shoulder and then just sequence right. So like those are pretty big ones to focus on. But like for the sequencing part, I think that's really important, because a lot of guys get pushy. One of the most common things we see. So
really hard to swing a 37-37 when you're pushy.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, it's going to kind of force you to sequence a little bit better. It's going to help you learn how to control the barrel out in front. On the flip side of that, something like if I had to pick one thing, like I'm going to do a lot of work with an underload, like just a ton of work. Like if I had limited amount of time to try to maintain what I'd been focused on, like I'm going to use the underload to kind of push the speed, take the governor off, and make sure I'm moving fast. But I love using the underload in season, not just for the speed element, but like the efficiency element of it. Like because the bat is lighter, it's harder to control it. It's like the example of a guy that's like really pushy, right? Like if you're getting pushy, you're getting disconnected and your sequencing is out of whack. And honestly, this is why I really like pairing the long bat and the underload. It's just damn near impossible to control the underload. So it's like you have to move really efficiently. And when you started talking about your BP rounds, we're going to be a little more controlled, like hitting some balls oppo, then going pull side. It's like my head immediately went to just like on the bat speed days, like if you're alternating bat speed, bat to ball, it's like do all of it with an underload, right? Because like rather than trying to like push and guide the ball to the opposite field, you're not gonna be able to control the underload or move it fast that way. So it's going to force you to back up the point of contact, make sure you're sequencing well, like you're getting slotted, working behind the ball the right way, so that like when you are pushing the intensity, it's under control and you can actually drive the ball to that part of the field. It's like learning how to move that way and control the barrel with that type of depth with like a lighter implement. It's only going to help you figure out how to sequence better and like learn how to control the barrel as you get further out in front. So like you're like priming yourself to be able to like drive the ball the other way, lower ball flight. And then like when you go to let it eat to the pull side, you're already moving really, really well. And like you're going to be efficient as you're doing so.
Yeah. And that reminds me of like when I was hitting, I would always be like, man, I could hit the ball so well to the opposite field. And then when I tried to pull it, it would just all go to shit. And it almost played into what like my coaches would tell me, which was, just stay like low the other way.
Yeah, it's like, see, you're so good. Your bread and butter is over here.
And it was like
when you try to pull it, it gets so bad. It's just because you didn't know how to do it. Right?
Yeah, it's because the only reason was because back deep in the zone is the only spot my swing was actually connected, because I'd get so pushy. So if I let it travel deeper, that like forced me to be connected. And then as soon as I tried to get out front and do damage, it was just hands under rotating.
Yeah, which brings me back to something you mentioned earlier, where like practicing pulling the ball with good spin, right? Like it's one of those things that can a lot of times kind of reverse engineer an efficient bat path, right? Like you can obviously spend all day trying to cheat to the pull side and going about it the wrong way. Doing so, like adding things like hitting plyos or smash factor balls is going to like decrease that margin for error, and it's really going to expose you going about those things incorrectly. But like if you're really practicing and learning how to pull the ball with good ball flight, like a lot of times that's really going to help you reverse engineer a good bat path. That's going to help you hit the ball to all fields. That being said, you should practice all of these things, right?
Yeah,
like you should practice backing up the point of contact and going the other way. Like there's a reason for so long all these old school coaches are like, oh, like first round BP, like low oppo, we're doing that, right? And like that's not for the sake of just going low oppo, right? It's just like the back of the point of contact, make sure you're swinging well, like you're getting behind it in your downswing, and then you can progress the point of contact further out in front to where you're launched into the pull side, right?
Yes.
Like the ideal output you're looking for, like isn't going low oppo just for the sake of going low oppo, right? It's like a patterning thing for your swing, and the same thing to the pull side. Like I don't want you forcing the ball to the opposite field incorrectly. I don't want you forcing the ball in the air to the pull side incorrectly. Like that's not good for your bat path. You're gonna have some postural issues there. Like you should be focused on all of these things. But at the end of the day, what we've really been talking about is like maintaining skills, right? Like it all points back to that stuff. So the important things here is like HP side, right? Like we're looking to like manage your workload, looking to maintain the things you've been doing. It's only going to help you on the field, only going to help you with your skills. On the skill side, it's a little bit more complicated, but like you need to make sure you're maintaining bat speed at a minimum. That's going to help you a lot. And then from there, you can kind of take what you're struggling with in the game if you're playing and like use that to like fill in the gaps on the other things you need to focus on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I'd say that's it in a nutshell.